I don't know. It's tough with Luke Keary. He didn't have a great last 6 weeks in the competition. I think he was a little bit battered and bruised. He had his rib or back issue. I can't remember exactly what it was. But I think everyone forgets Luke Keary from about round 3 to round 10 was by far the best player in the competition. When they were winning games, 50, 60-0 against the Bulldogs, the Broncos, he was carving teams up and it was sensational what he was doing. And yes, when the going got tough in finals, he didn't really stand up and he lost form late in the year, but it's a regular season award. We don't take into account finals.
Queensland! It's a miracle! Oh, yeah! What about that one? No! Unbelievable! Balotelli! Aguero! Crowd cheers. Here's Siddle. Oh, the ball is close! He's given him! He's given him! Peter Siddle's got a hat-trick on his birthday!
Welcome back to the On the Ball podcast. This is episode 77 of the show. Pleasure to have you here listening or watching the show. Welcome to all the new listeners and watchers, and welcome to returning viewers. Today I'm doing an NRL episode. It's been a while. I think I did one at the end of the regular season, so maybe a month ago. And before then I hadn't done too much NRL, but it's one of my favourite sports, very passionate about it. So today I'm going to be the Dally M. I'm recording this on Tuesday. The Dally M Awards were on Monday night, so I was going to try and beat the Dally M's to it and do my own awards episode before it, but it didn't quite work in with my schedule, so I'm doing it a couple days after. But it's interesting to see how my team stacks up against theirs. But we're doing more than just a team of the year. We've got awards like Coach of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Transfer of the Year, Match of the Year, who our best player was, all stuff like that. So we're just going to work through the awards, have a chat about individual performances throughout the season, and yeah, we're just going to have a good time. So if you're new here, feel free to subscribe or follow the podcast depending on what you're listening or watching on, and feel free to like and comment and all that good stuff and get around our social media. We would really appreciate that. Alright, starting with Match of the Year, we'll start with a nice light fun one. Match of the Year, I'm going to give it to Melbourne Storm versus the Sydney Roosters. Round 8, it was Thursday night footy. The final score was 27-25, but this game just had absolutely everything in it. There were 8 tries scored, 7 out of 8 converted, so a high quality game in terms of scoring. Melbourne scored 2 late tries. I think the Sydney Roosters scored in maybe the 68th minute. And then the Storm scored in the 71st and 74th, if my memory serves me right. And that was to take the lead, sorry. And then, that did tie it up, sorry, at 24 all. And then both teams slotted field goals in the 79th minute. Keary kicked his first, and you kind of thought it was all over. And then the Storm charged down the field, and Pappenhausen slotted his. No one really would have thought it'd be Pappenhausen. You would have thought it'd be Munster or Smith or even Hughes, and Pappenhausen stood up and slotted one from a pretty far distance, like 35 metres. And then that took us to extra time. It was 25 all at this point, golden point. And Jake Friend gave away a penalty in golden point for a high tackle, which it's probably not the most climactic way to finish a match that I'm calling Match of the Year, but I found it was just a controversial ending, bit of a different one rather than someone just slotting a field goal over from 20 out. And yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of Jake Friend, so I found that a little bit funny. And it was a pretty blatant penalty as well, so there wasn't too much argument over it. And then Cam Smith slotted that. But yeah, what I loved about this match was just really high quality, very fast footy, and it was Thursday night. We had been through so many poor Thursday night games at that stage, so it was a nice shock. I think Brisbane had played pretty much every Thursday night before that and produced stinkers. So yep, Storm Roosters definitely lived up to the billing, and it was, for me, Match of the Year. Alright, moving into the second award. I don't really know what order I'm going to go in, but I'm just going to do it based on how I'm feeling. I'm going to go Coach of the Year next up. For me, I agree with the Dally M's giving it to Ivan Cleary. He was the Coach of the Year for me. Brought the Panthers from 10th to 1st. They didn't really do it through signing anyone huge. Yes, they signed Apisai Coruscant, but they did lose James Maloney as well. they also signed Zane Tedavano and Capewell. So I don't know how much he was involved with those signings, but they were all great signings by the club whatsoever. However, and they blooded a lot of youngsters throughout the season. They all did their parts when they played. They actually used quite a few debutants as well. Blokes like Charlie Staines, Dane Laurie, they all did really well when they got their chance. And now they have a squad, there's blokes who are being left out of that squad who would start in pretty much every team. We saw on the weekend like Brent Naden, who's probably one of the most informed centres in the comp, got benched. So they've got a really deep squad, a really young squad, really exciting squad, a lot of local juniors as well. And Ivan Cleary's really got the best out of them. So for me, he is definitely Coach of the Year. Shout outs, I'd have to give it to, they were also nominees for the Dally M Coach of the Year, but Justin Holbrook would probably be second for me. Took the Titans from 16th without any future to a club that was one win outside the top 8, and now they're building a really exciting setup there, looking good for the future. They've obviously made some great signings for next year with Tino Fasmalawi and David Fafita, and along with a few others. They play a really exciting style of footy. They were involved in a lot of good matches actually this season, which is unusual for the Titans. And yeah, he got the best out of Jamal Fogarty. He really stood up this year as a premier halfback in the competition, and that allowed Ash Taylor to really shine in a secondary role in that halves pairing. And AJ Brimson, when he came back from his injury, he was thriving. I know Brimson's had big raps for a long time, but I think this year we really saw what he can do at full flight because he was insane this year. And then thirdly, but not definitely not last. Well, I guess he is kind of last out of the three, but doesn't take anything away from his achievement. Todd Pate only coached from about round 6 or 7 onwards, maybe later, but obviously led the Warriors team as interim head coach after Stephen Kearney got sacked. They had were in Australia the whole season. Once again, shout out to the Warriors for doing that. I got around them in the last episode, but can't really get around them enough for that. And they ended up coming 10th. To me, they're probably not as exciting as the Titans. I think their future is still a little bit less clear as the Titans. You kind of see the Titans' path to success, but they found their halves pairing, which is really important. It's kind of been an issue with the Warriors, after Sean Johnson left. With Harris DeVita and Cody Nikorima, both exciting players and fairly young as well. They were just getting a lot out of the team. They do have a few stars. They've got obviously Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, but I think they were overachieving in 10th, which is a good sign for a coach when he's getting more out of his players than you would probably expect. Like looking at that Warriors best, if you looked at the Warriors best 13, you'd probably say they were one of the weaker teams in the competition. So to come 10th, not too far out of the 8, is very good. Good achievement from Toddy Payton. Alright, I was going to do Rookie of the Year and Signing of the Year, but I was just realised that will probably give away some of my team. So I'm just going to go straight into the Team of the Year. I love my statistics, my data, and I'm really... I pretty much use statistics for everything, but I decided for this I'm just going to go off eyeballing the season. I've pretty much watched every single match of the year, I think barring 2. Missed a couple of that Sunday 6 p.m. time slot, the worst time slot there is. Missed a couple of those, but apart from that, I pretty much watch every game. So I'm not claiming I'm an expert, but I thought for once I'll back my instincts in rather than just looking at statistics, because, statistics are limited at how much they can tell us because they are just a number at the end of the day. But, alright, I'll start from the back. Fullback of the year. For me, it's James Tedesco. I believe Clint Gutherson won the Dally M Fullback of the Year. A forward... So the Team of the Year at the Dally M's, I don't know if those listening know this, I think most people do. It's done based on the Dally M votes. So it's the fullback who had the most votes, the winger who had the most votes. So to me, I don't think that's a great representation of who the best players are, because obviously you kind of favour, for example, Katoni Staggs, nothing against Katoni Staggs, great player, but he benefited a lot from being in a really bad team in Brisbane because he stood out when they won because he was the only good player. So I do know there's no real perfect way to go about it, but for me the voting system is flawed. So For these positional awards, I'm just going to be going off who I think the best player was in that position for the year. So fullback of the year, I've gone with James Tedesco. Probably the boring option. Yes, the Dalians did have Clint Gutherson, but I do think James Tedesco was probably underappreciated this year. I think last season he might have even almost got overappreciated because he was just so awesome, but I think everyone kind of just hopped on that. Won every award he possibly could, which he deserved, but I think everyone overhyped him, so then coming into this year, they were expecting an unrealistic level. And this year, he performed really well, but because of how well he performed in 2019, I think people viewed him as having an off-season, which is completely false. James Tedesco was a key reason why the Roosters still managed to be in the top four, despite not playing sensationally for, like half the season. Not really half the season, but like the first couple rounds and the last couple. So for me, James Tedesco is fullback of the year. I'm going to be also picking like a second team of the year almost, so like the backups for each position. So for me, the second fullback would have been Ryan Papenhuyzen. I think Papenhuyzen he could have won the fullback of the year, but for me, he just stands out because he's got such blistering pace, and he was playing on a really fluid offense that was led by Munster, Hughes, Smith. So. Not that the Roosters are a bad team at all. He's not really struggling, is he there, Teddy? But yeah, for me, Papenhuyzen's number 2. Clint Gutherson missing out. Also, fullback was pretty tough. There was maybe 5 or 6 that were really good. Dufty, Roger, they were all pretty awesome. Ponga. Teddy in the first team for me, Papenhuyzen in the second. And that moves us on to Wingers of the Year. I'm actually going to agree the Dally M Awards here. I'm going Adokar and Nofaluma. Nofaluma was the top try scorer for a lot of the year till like the last 2 rounds when Felt overtook him and then Johnston overtook them. But he was just awesome in attack. I'm a Tigers fan myself, if you can't see my hat, so maybe a little bit of bias here. Let me know what you think. I don't know if he should play Origin. I've heard a lot of conversation about that. I think defensively he's not quite up to it, but in such a insane New South Wales side, I feel like you might be almost able to afford I don't know, because you could argue you could afford to have a less attacking winger, but then you could also argue you can have a less defensive winger. But yeah, I don't know. I do think he is also hampered with his inside defenders not being too great, so I don't think he trusts them. But yeah, for me, Nofaluma in attack, just sensational. I think he had a couple off years in 2018, 2019, if I'm not wrong. I think his best year was 2017, might be wrong in that, but he kind of hit those peaks again and went further than he did in those seasons, just charging out of the backfield. Sometimes he goes on these weird sideways wandering runs and then he just scoots left and all of a sudden he's in a hole and he finds 15 metres. And yeah, he just never gives up. He's always someone, even if the momentum's against us, he'll give it his all on the first or second tackles to get it off our own line. So yeah, for me, Nofaluma, deservedly winger of the year. And then Adokar on the other side. Adokar is probably one of the most exciting players in the comp. So fast, and this year he's kind of leveled up. I think every year until now he was just a really strong athletic winger. Really fast athletic winger. But now he's strong. He can tackle. He's not probably got ball playing, but he has more skills than he did as such. I don't know if he's a fullback just yet, despite what he wants to be. So for me, Adokar, winger of the year, along with David Nofaluma. In the seconds, I've gone with Alex Johnston, and probably a shock, but I've gone with Ronaldo Mulitalo. I don't think there were too many great wingers this year. I think, Ferguson had a down year. Daniel Tupou didn't play much. Even blokes like Mike Asiva, I don't think they were that great. And for me, Mulitalo, he only played, I think, 14 matches. And for me, that's the requirement. You've got to play 14 or more. So that might be a precursor to some of the other awards. But yeah, Mulitalo, I think, in his, he didn't play the full season, but when he played, he made such an impact, which is sometimes quite hard for a winger to do because they're obviously isolated on that edge. But yeah, every time he ran the ball, he was aggressive. In defence, he's aggressive. He finishes really well. And yes, he's a little bit aggro, and I'm not the biggest fan of him personally, but he is a really good player. You can tell he's very passionate about his team, loves getting into a bit of a scuff for the boys. But I think Mulitalo, for me, he could probably be a Queensland winger this year, if not in the years to come, because he's a very exciting prospect. And for me, he's in the seconds. the second team of the year. And then the other side, Alex Johnson, for no other real reason than he won the top try scorer. Usually the top try scorer is a winger, and they usually find themselves in the team of the year. But for me this year, Adokar and Nofaluma were too good, so I'll stick him in the seconds. That moves us on to centre of the year. As I mentioned, Staggs, I think he was good. Probably didn't deserve to be in the team of the year. Oh, that's hard to say because I do love him. But ultimately, he only played 12 matches, and for me, the minimum was 14 or more. I just don't think 12 is only just more than half the season. Like, I don't know if you can have that much of an impact, but he was pretty bloody good, I have to say. Had some standout performances. But yeah, centre of the year, I'm going to go, the Dally M Awards had this, but Stephen Crichton, what he did in his first year in the NRL was absolutely insane. I reckon he put on so much muscle over the lockdown period, to be honest, because in the first couple of games, he came on as a super sub, and he was like this tall, lanky bloke, and then he came back, and he was like shredded, a genuine unit. I didn't know where he was going to play in that back line of the Panthers, because it was pretty stacked already, but he displaced Dean Vare from the side, and I think Vare might have got injured, and then he slotted in there, but Vare couldn't get back into the team. And yeah, Crichton, he is playing in a very good team, so you can often look good without being too good, but I think he was very influential on that left edge of the Panthers, scored a lot of tries, formed a great combination with Luai, Kikau, and Mansour on that edge, became one of the most dangerous edges in the competition, and yeah, such a dangerous ball runner, so powerful, so fast, athletic, everything you want in a centre, and for me, he was centre of the year. In general, I have to say, I think centres took a step up this year. I think last few seasons there's not been too many good centres, but this year I think the position kind of came back into vogue. I think the second row position might have gone out a little bit. I think that was a lot more important in previous years, but this year I think centres and props really stood out to me personally anyway. So Crichton, he is the number one centre for me. Agree with the Dally M Awards there. As I said, I don't agree with Staggs. I've gone with Justin Olam. Probably another guy who benefits from being on a great team, but I think how far Justin Olam has come in his short time in the NRL has been quite sensational. And him down with on that left edge with Kenny Bromwich, Munster, and Adokar is comfortably the best edge in the competition for me. He is so talented, so strong. He's just a nutcase, really. Like, he just flies into tackles. When he has the ball, he just launches himself into it. We saw his try in the prelim final on the weekend where he just soared over the pack on the ground to score that try. I just love the way he plays. He's just a bullet in everything he does. And yeah, for me, Justin Olam has been one of the best Storm players this season, and that's why I've got him as centre of the year. In the seconds, I've got Zach Lomax. I was tempted to put him in as centre of the year, but I think he didn't have as much impact as Olam and Crichton, and he was one of the best, probably next to Dufty, the Dragons' best player. They had a few good players. I talked about them in the last episode if you want to go check that out, a season review of the teams who missed finals. But yeah, Lomax, sensational player. Sometimes he would just take over games. Even if it was just for 10 minutes, he would just... one of the best kick chasers, like when one of the Dragons playmakers puts up a bomb, you almost know Lomax is going to be there to contest for it, and he set up so many tries with knockdowns and stuff like that. But yep, so dangerous out on that edge. I heard all the raps of Lomax coming into first grade, and I saw him play a few times, and I didn't rate him that highly, and I think at fullback he wasn't that impressive, but I think he's really found a home at centre. And I hope he is satisfied with playing at centre, because I think he's a better centre than a fullback. He was really good this year. And then my other guy's a bit of an unsung hero, in my opinion, Peter Hiku. I think he was a huge part of the Warriors' surprising success this year. He had, I don't know the exact numbers, but he had some ridiculous amount of try assists and tries. I think he would have been right up there if you combine those two stats. So like try involvements is what they would call it in soccer. So try involvements, I think he would have been top 10, top 5 in the competition for that. And to do that from centre is really impressive. But yeah, ultimately, I think he was just a bit of an unsung hero. Set up a lot of tries. I remember he scored a hat-trick. He might have even scored 2. Definitely scored a hat-trick, though, early on in the season. And yeah, for me, Hiku was really good on that right edge for the Warriors. 5/8 of the year. This was a tough one for me. It was a 3-horse race between Luke Keary, Cody Walker, and Jerome Luai. I've left Luai out of both teams. It was very stiff, but I just think he's surrounded by so many talented players. I know the other two guys are in great teams as well, but for me, Luai, I don't even really know why. They're all great players, nothing against any of them. I just decided to pick these two on the day, but could have easily picked Luai. But for me in the first team, I've got Luke Keary. I think, I don't know, it's tough with Luke Keary. He didn't have a great last 6 weeks in the competition. I think he was a little bit battered and bruised. He had his rib or back issue. I can't remember exactly what it was. But I think everyone forgets Luke Keary from about round 3 to round 10 was by far the best player in the competition. When they were winning games, 50, 60-0 against the Bulldogs, the Broncos, he was carving teams up and it was sensational what he was doing. And yes, when the going got tough in finals, he didn't really stand up and he lost form late in the year, but it's a regular season award. We don't take into account finals. And for me, that's why Luke Keary is the 5/8 of the year. Cody Walker, I've got him in second. I think a lot of people would be outraged to have Keary over Walker, but I think that's a bit of recency bias. I think Walker was really strong in the last 6 weeks, but prior to that, he was good, but I don't think he was sensational like Keary was. So it's just a bit of a toss-up, really, between Keary and Walker. One was great in the end, one was great in the middle to start. So it was a tough one, but yeah, I went Keary over Walker, and then Luai just missed out. But all three great players, and yeah. That takes us on to halfback of the year. For me, this is the easiest position in the team and might be hinting at a future award coming up. But Nathan Cleary is the halfback of the year by an absolute country mile. I do think the 5/8s were probably better than the halfbacks this year, which is pretty rare. Usually the 5/8s are like the secondary player in the pairing, but I think there was 5 or 6 5/8s that were probably the level of, the top 2 or 3 halfbacks, if you know what I mean. But Nathan Cleary, for me, halfback of the year. Yes, he did have that old TikTok controversy, and he got suspended, which I don't really factor that in. But for me, he just controlled so many of the Panthers' games. I think he has not fallen out of form, but I think he's become less dominant in the last 6 weeks. Maybe they're less reliant on him as Jerome Luai's hit form, but just early on in the season, he would just do absolutely everything for them. Also a bit of a try-scoring machine, just quietly. Great goal kicker, great in-play kicker, just great controller of everything they do, really. So creative, yet so organised, which is a rare combination in the National Rugby League. And for me, Cleary was by far and away the halfback of the year. Next up, in the seconds, I've got Jerome Hughes, probably a controversial one. But yeah, I went with Hughes over the likes of, George Williams, Adam Reynolds, but for me, he was just sensational this year. I can't really believe how well he's transitioned to the position. Yes, he's an unconventional halfback, as they've got Cameron Smith there to do most of the organising, but he's so talented in those big games, like that game I mentioned, the Sydney Roosters Storm one. He really stood up, which is probably you wouldn't have expected. You'd probably expect Munster and Smith to dominate those ones, but Hughes really played well on those tough nights. And I think he's a big reason as to how well they've played this year. And yeah, Jerome Hughes for me is the seconds halfback of the year. I think I've stopped mentioning who won the Dally M awards. So 5/8 was Jack Whiten. He missed out on that award for me. And then halfback, they agree with me with Nathan Cleary. Then for prop of the year, I semi-agree with what the Dally M selectors, the Dally M votes produced for props of the year. I agree with Josh Papali. He was absolutely immense. I do think Joe Tarpany is underappreciated at the Raiders. I do think Papali does get a lot of the attention, even though Tarpany, in my opinion, in a lot of the matches is just as good, if not better than Big Papa. But Papa is insane. The size of him, mixed with how long he can go for, is something that in itself is just a freak asset that he brings to the side. But yeah, his ball playing, his offloading, his hard running, his tackling, everything, just a great player, deserves all the plaudits he gets. Then, rather than James Fisher-Harris, I've partnered him up with Fisher-Harris's former teammate, Regan Campbell-Gillard. Very tight. There was about 6 props that were all pretty close for me, but I thought Campbell Gillard was immense this year, moving to Parramatta. I think he really rediscovered his career and rediscovered his passion for footy. Well, I don't really know him too well, but I know he got dropped to reserve grade at Penrith, so really, kept that flame of his career burning at Parramatta, and likely to see some rep footy again this year. Had an absolutely outstanding year. This might be a little bit biased because I was obviously paying more attention to this match than most, but I remember that try he scored against the Tigers at Bankwest where he just ran up the middle of the ruck, went past Dewey, ran about 50 metres in total. He's fast, he's agile, he's tall, just a great player. And then a few players to miss out on the seconds. I had Payne Haas missing out, Junior Paulo missing out. All I thought were pretty stiff, but my seconds for the second team, my props are James Fisher-Harris and Adam Fanua-Blake. I think both went sensational. Fanua-Blake missed a few games through suspension and injury, but when Fanua-Blake plays, I think he's probably the best prop in the competition. And just his post-contact meters, the things he brings to that side is outrageous. And Fisher-Harris is just probably the most dependable forward in the comp. Hooker of the year, it's probably a bit boring, but I agree with the Dally M's that Cameron Smith was the best hooker of the year. Just sensational what he brings to that side week in, week out. He's the game manager, takes a lot of the kicks, the ball player, he just does everything around, steers that team around. I think he is control of the side. He let go a little bit this year, let the creative guys loose a little bit more, but still... his impact is undeniable. So many try assists, so many line break assists, and then his defence is always pretty solid up the middle as well. So for me, he's the hooker of the year. Very close behind Api Coruscant. Coruscant just dominated a few matches throughout the season. A few weeks, he probably didn't offer as much, as a Cam Smith would just reliably produce each week. So that's probably why I've gone Smith, but... yeah, and then Grant was probably just missing out there for me, but Coruscant was a great pickup from the Penny Panthers. Second rower, they had Kickout and Tohu Harris. I've actually flicked Kickout completely. I think Kickout's pretty overrated. And now I say that, he's going to, win the Clive Churchill on Sunday in the granny. But yeah, for me, he's overrated. He's just really big. He's exciting when he gets the ball, but half the time he's just... a decoy runner, really. There was a few matches where he touched the ball 3 or 4 times, which for me, someone winning an award like second row of the year probably needs to be having more impact week in, week out. So for me, I think that was a pretty bad call. But with the voting system, his game suits the voting system because he has 3 or 4 great games against bad teams, and he picks up 2 or 3 votes and that accumulates. So. But yeah, for me, Tohu Harris is also there. Statistically, he had an insane season. His tackles and meters were just sensational. But yeah, really, he kind of had a few off years after leaving Melbourne, but I think he was playing career best footy this year. Really solid in the back row of the Warriors. And then my other guys, probably another unsung hero, Kenny Bromwich. I think he is underrated in terms of what he brings to that team. You think of that left edge and you just think Adokar and Munster, but I think Kenny Bromwich is actually one of the pivotal parts to that. He's often the guy who's drawing that centre and flicking it off, creating a 2-on-1 out wide. He's just crucial to so much they do. A different kind of second row. He's not running lines, he's not breaking tackles, he's a ball player, but I think he's really solid. Very solid in defence, and then brings a little bit of pizzazz to that attack. They're obviously already a quality team, but for him too, he's almost like a Wade Graham in the way he ball plays, in my opinion. But I think he just goes a little bit unsung because he's in such a star-studded team. So for him, they're my second rowers of the year. In the seconds team, I've gone a few probably surprises, but Liam Martin of the Penrith Panthers, I think he's been very solid all year. I do have to say, I think second row took a bit of a step backwards this year. I think a lot of the big name second rowers had less dominant seasons than they had in the past. But yeah, Liam Martin was very strong, and in the last 5 matches, he kind of turned into a bit of a beast, producing big hits, scoring tries, making breaks. But yeah, just had been really solid all year and one of the more reliable members in that team. And then another guy I've got, believe it or not, from the Bulldogs, Raymond Fatala Mariner. For me, he was the definite bright spot of the Bulldogs season. So many line breaks, scored a few tries as well. He was just a great player this year. Kind of always noticed him because he's always had pretty funky hair. He's got a good name, like a unusual name. So you always kind of took notice of him. He wasn't a myth or anything, but this year it wasn't really for his abilities, but this year I think everyone kind of noticed that he's actually a pretty good player, and I'm sure if he one day gets on a better team, I'm sure we'll see his true potential. Lock of the year. I'm actually not giving it to Jason Tamalolo like the selectors did. Tamalolo was very good, yes, statistically awesome, but for me, if you watch the games, I don't think he had as much impact as he normally did this season. I think he started very strong in the first month. He was having career numbers, but I think after his injury, when he came back, he wasn't as good and he wasn't as dominant. And maybe that's because the Cowboys were pretty bad overall, so he was not running with momentum, if you know what I mean. The team wasn't really flowing. But yeah, I don't think he was as good. But in saying that, I've put him in the second team of the year here, so had a pretty good year. But for lock of the year, I've got Nathan Brown. Don't really like him as a Tigers fan, as he obviously left the Tigers, or I don't even remember what happened there. We let him go or something. But yeah, I think he is the best lock, in my opinion. I think he should play New South Wales. He's obviously not going to. They'll pick Jake Trbojevic, but Nathan Brown just runs so hard. He's arguably a better, not a prop, but he plays a similar role as Campbell Gillard and Junior Paulo, and he's probably arguably the best of the three, and they're two quality props, world-class props in their own right. So yeah, Nathan Brown, different kind of lock to, a Jake Trbojevic or a Victor Radley, but he's such a hard runner, provides so many big hits, and for me, he's just a wrecking ball. So for me, he's the lock of the year. All right, moving on to the other awards, now that we've gone through the team of the year. Rookie of the year, it went to Harry Grant on the night, but I'm actually giving it to Stephen Crichton. He was in my team of the year, so I think if you're in the team of the year, you probably deserve an award like this. If you're the best player in your position, I think you deserve it. Yes, he probably had less impact on games than Grant because of the position he played, but for me, he was such an influential member in the best team of the season and who could become the premiers on Sunday. And for someone to do that in their rookie year, I think that's pretty incredible. Yes, Grant was awesome over the first 8 weeks, was probably one of the best players in the comp, but after his injury, I think he came back and he wasn't as good. I live in a house of Tigers fans, and they reckon it's just because the team wasn't playing as well, but I actually think in the first few rounds of the season, he was the reason we were playing well. So he was the catalyst, not necessarily he was jumping off the back of the team doing well. So that's just my opinion. But so I've got Crichton just pipping Grant there, but that was pretty tight. They both had great years. And then signing of the year, it's a two-horse race for me, but I've just gone Campbell Gillard over Coruscant. Probably because where he came from as well. He was playing reserve grade a little bit last year, Campbell Gillard. And he's come back and now he's looking ready to play rep footy. He's in my team of the year. And Coruscant, he was also sensational, but I've just gone Campbell Gillard over Coruscant, but realistically, either one of them are definitely deserving of that award. And that's it for my 2020 NRL regular season, just season awards. Really enjoyed going through these today. I hope I didn't rush too much, but I didn't want to get too statistical or dry or anything, so I kind of just spoke off what I've seen. I'm sorry if you disagree with me. Feel free to leave a comment or something. If you don't, once again, I remind you to please subscribe, get around the podcast in whatever way you can or want to, and really appreciate you for listening. We've got more content coming as always. We've got an NFL one coming out. If you're an NRL fan and you're only here for NRL, we've got an NRL one coming out next week after the grand final. If you dabble in other sports, we've got weekly NFL content, and we've got an AFL one coming up. And then, we regularly pump out pretty much episodes on every sport. So feel free to subscribe and stay tuned for what's to come. Thanks for joining me today, and enjoy the rest of your week and enjoy the grand final day. Just quick prediction before I go. I'm going to back in the Melbourne Storm to win 20-14. Not really sure why I'm predicting that scoreline, but I just felt it. Melbourne Storm 20-14 over the Penrith Panthers in Cameron Smith and Craig Bellamy's last game involved with the Melbourne Storm. Thanks for listening and enjoy the grand final. Go the Storm.